Okay, 7:01, the 12th, Wednesday. We call the meeting to order. We have a quorum?
We do?
Okay. So we have minutes from the planning board. Has everyone seen those? Thank you for forwarding them.
You're welcome. And thank you, David, for doing that.
Earl, have you seen these?
I think I looked at them at one point, but I'm just fine.
When did you send them out? You sent them out,
Yeah,
right?
quite a
I
while
sent
ago.
them, no, I actually sent them
Yesterday?
yesterday, yes,
Oh,
just
really?
yesterday.
And only the first joint part applies to us.
Right.
Well, the well, I have questions about them. If we want to approve them, then we can discuss them, that's okay.
So, I'd see a couple things that I would change, and I can send these over to David.
So will you take comments and send them back to him?
Yes, I will.
Okay, Earl, your
Well-
comments first?
If Russ said his findings show that the various development scenarios studied would be unlikely to have a significant positive impact on the Lyme's tax base, I find that whole philosophy questionable. And I don't know if that's the way it was stated, then fine. I just, at some point later on, when we get to later in the evening, I want to discuss tax consequences versus projects.
Okay.
Now, if this was, if Russ said this, then fine, that's what it is.
Okay. We did not have a video of that meeting, that
That's
joint
right.
meeting.
In fact, I realized there was a record button that I probably could have pressed, but, yes.
Sue, do you have any comments on the minutes?
I have a couple
Go ahead.
little comments. They misspelled your name, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
So I will note that. And it's Roger Hawk, no S. So I noted that. I thought it was a decent summary of the
My comment is, he said that I was satisfied the results in hand were accurate. I thought they were discouraging. I'm not sure if they were accurate. So, I guess I take issue with that word accurate, because I don't think we had all the base data to determine if they were accurate.
Where are you seeing
First page,
that? I'm there.
it's fourth paragraph up from the bottom. It said Chris said he was satisfied with the results in hand were accurate. And it may be that we agree that there are lots of limitations, like internet and things like that. That is accurate, but whether or not we agree that the conclusions are accurate is different.
How would you like to see that language rephrased? Because seeing as how it's your words,
Yep.
You can say anything you want.
I think rather than accurate, I would say discouraging.
Okay.
If you are trying to find a positive tax outcome, or a revenue outcome.
Yep.
Okay, so can we agree that we'll give the feedback to them, see if they'll modify some of that, and then we'll vote on it when we get it back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
we're all in agreement with that?
Okay.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about agenda. Sue, what would you like to get through tonight?
Well, first off, our perceptions of what has happened thus far and what can we do to alter the course.
Okay.
And also then deal with this issue with the questionnaire.
Okay. Earl, what would you like to get done tonight?
I just want to talk about the relationship between tax effects of projects.
What do you mean by project?
Well, when we get to the survey, in other words, if we were saying something like, would you be in favor of a commercial development? All of these things, I think we need to be upfront about it. All these things are to prove a tax positive. And I don't know if that whole message is getting through, but that's what our aim is to do. I don't know, maybe I'm just not reading it all or understanding it all, but
That
it,
goes to my first point.
Okay, so we'll make sure we cover that.
we can talk about that like
What would you like to get through?
I'd certainly like to take some time to talk about David Shaver's questions.
Mhm.
And it's not too soon to talk about a publicity campaign, about what we're gonna do. And I think we've sort of hashed out what needs to be done,
Mhm.
but there's maybe assignments to be handed out, sending out notes to the various groups, making sure the poster gets out. And,
Okay.
Have to make sure what it's gonna say first.
Yep.
well, there's that too.
Okay.
And I guess I wanna talk about what we want to say, what we expect the consultants to bring back to us as far as revisions and updates and all.
Mhm.
I would also like to know whether Pondview Apartments is mentioned again in our, in with them or with us, or where we're going with that. I think that's a very important subject.
Right. They, we're waiting for them to get back to us with a plan. That was when they were last here,
Which who?
the two brothers, the Purcell brothers,
No,
that own Pondview.
no, what, the interest I have is they have a project that is currently there. They're Pondview Apartments.
Right, oh,
And the fact that from what they said, they did not develop any children in that mix when they were renting it. And I think that was a key issue, because I think that's what we're looking for, is, we're not hateful to kids, but if we can develop, if we are building something and it does not encourage more students at the school, then it may be easier to be tax positive. If we build something where 25 or 30 kids are coming in, we can't win, money-wise.
Did you read the article I sent out? From Town and Country?
Yeah.
I've read parts of that, but it was longer than my time at the moment.
3 pages, okay.
So I guess I'd like to say that we have basically 2.5 weeks before the first meeting. So I'd like to have a clear line of what we're gonna do in the next 15 days.
That's absolutely fine.
And the feedback we give to them, and the questionnaire. I'd also like to make sure we have coverage at each of the meetings, and that we talk about how it's going to be moderated, because I want to get through the presentation before we get into questions and things can unravel. So talk about how we hope that those meetings will be structured. So in the next 50 or 60 minutes, let's see if we can get through each of our concerns, and we'll start with Sue. So the first comment you made was perception.
Yeah, I was very disappointed and discouraged when I left their presentation.
Okay.
I thought it was canned presentation that really didn't, didn't look at, it just, you know, looked at what, they didn't do any work. They just regurgitated statistics from around the state with some information from Lyme. But I was gonna go back and look at our charts to say, you know, we wanted to see what the different scenarios would produce, and some, you know, and not to be so discouraging. There's a way of presenting information that gives people some hope that there may be, not to decrease Lyme's tax base, that's not gonna happen, but to help mitigate the increases
Okay.
that are coming.
So my feedback to you on that would be there are 2 or 3 variables that drive all of the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And the average number of kids per unit, or educated children in the school system per unit, is the key variable on the expense side, and that drives everything.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the comments we got back were, hey, how about some of the outliers from Lebanon, and, you know, are we really, but there's also feedback that says, hey, it should be higher than what they expected.
Right.
So I think part of our feedback to the consultant should be, we want to have that variable highlighted to show how important it is. You know, if it's 0.45, you know, we might actually be tax negative. If it's 0.39, we generate $400,000. If it's 0.20, we might generate $800,000 of new revenue per year. So I would like to see some analysis of that key variable in the scenarios, because that's, to Earl's point, depending upon what we choose and what we get, it could be very different outcomes. So I think that should be part of our feedback, and I agree with you, it was very negative. There weren't any, not just solutions, but there weren't even avenues.
There weren't any lights in there shining any possibilities.
And maybe that's the truth, I don't know, but I agree with you. I don't think we've explored it enough to shut it down.
Right, right.
Okay? Next comment was sort of altering course.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't cast in concrete. If we're not ready for October 1st, we can cancel it and push it off later.
Who knows about October 1st right now?
Nobody, but the 2 committees and the consultant.
And there's been whispers.
It's been
But
whispered
there's
out there,
nothing,
yeah.
but we've not made a public statement that we're having
Well,
these
I
meetings.
think the Community Cares of Lyme has
Okay.
made it, but that's not a showstopper. If we're not ready, we shouldn't go. If we're not happy with the presentation,
Okay.
we shouldn't let it happen.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a
Yes.
great point. Right. Let's not go up there if we're not ready.
Right.
Okay?
When would we like to have the surveys finished and the definitive report? And at what point in the future would we like to have all that done, where we can say, this is what the people say, now what?
At the end of the 3 information sessions.
Okay, but what, at the end of November, the end of December?
Depends on when the last presentation is. Yeah,
Well, no, but when we
Q4.
want to.
I would argue Q4.
Hmm?
I would argue Q4, October, November, December. And I don't, because we're not gonna affect this year's budget, but we're talking about the 2019 budget, the 2020 budget.
You're gonna, all right, that we need to get through our little heads, that whatever we're doing is not something that is going to affect the next budget or whatever, because you've already got half planned anyway.
And I'd argue that the things we're talking about are 5 years out.
Of course, you're not going to build something overnight to get,
We've got-
even if we're gonna get
We've got to get somebody who
50,000.
wants to build it, gotta get it approved, zoned, and then built, and then rented, and then taxed.
No, I think that you guys are bringing up a good point. We wanna make sure that we're comfortable about where we are.
Yep.
And if we have anything from whatever's gonna happen on to what does the apartments tell us at Pondview, to all these other things, I think it's important that we feel that we are comfortable.
And
Because
I'm
when
not-
I look
I'm
at the
not with what
survey,
if they present what they presented to us, we've lost all our works for naught.
well, I kinda had that impression, it looked like, yeah, a lot of towns are in these problems and they haven't been able to solve them.
Yeah,
And you
so
can't
what
do
makes
it.
you think you can? We're trying.
Which, quite frankly, we shouldn't blame the consultants if that's, that's what the facts tell them. But we need to come up with scenarios that give us a path that's different than most towns. Quite frankly, I think there's a whole bunch of pieces to the solution, not just this one.
Oh, absolutely. I never said there was
So what do we
any
do
one.
with the,
I think that needs to be part of our feedback to them, that we're not comfortable, moving forward on October 1, 15 days from now.
Yep.
and I guess we have to ask them, in all their doom and gloom, if there are any possibilities of solving the problem, period.
I'm going back to that key variable of children per unit, but there may be other things that we haven't uncovered. The whole question about, the state level questions about taxes and land and how close we are to the norm on the percentages of Lyme that are conserved or in current use. So I think there's a bunch of questions that can be asked over the next 30 or 45 days.
Well, I think you guys have opened the door to give us an opportunity to have something worthwhile, and not just do it, get done and say, we want something else.
Just because we're on this schedule doesn't mean we have to stick to it if we're not ready.
Well, and part of this was trying to push forward when we felt other groups were slowing us down, and now,
No,
I agree with everyone that let's not push this forward just for the sake of getting it done. Let's get it done and get it done right. Earl, you mentioned tax effects of projects. Have we already covered that, or are there more things that we want to
Well,
give
when we-
feedback?
Like, for example, when I was looking at the survey,
Mhm.
the survey should say, madam, or whatever, Sarah, if we were to do this and make sure it is positive tax-wise, are you interested? I think that whole message you get through that we're not gonna screw around. We are here to make our tax bill, or whatever you wanna call it, as meaningful as possible. If we're going to add buildings, or we're going to go with commercial, or whatever, it's for that particular purpose. And I didn't, in other words, are you interested in more commercial development in Lyme, period, or something like that? Doesn't do a
No.
damn thing for us,
no,
Right.
unless they understand that this whole process is aiming at tax relief. That's what we're doing.
Or is part of a greater plan to make Lyme a more attractive place, so that the next generation of ideas generate positive, tax base. Because I think it's all interrelated. There are some.
Well, and you don't want the conservationists to say, these guys are trying to kill us. Or you don't want to, that's not the purpose. If we like Lyme, then what can we do to solve this problem?
Mhm.
We're not about ready to kick all the deer out or whatever.
There's no chance of that.
No,
Nor squirrels, but let's not go there.
Your note about Pond View?
Only that Pond View, to me, is right in our own yard, perhaps an example of building that we could do.
An
That would be
example of
tax
success.
positive.
Yep, and probably a slide in their presentation about what that has done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much money we get out of Pond View, but my goodness, we're talking, also, everyone's all interested in affordable housing. Well, I don't know how much they charge, but I assume their housing is somewhat affordable.
it must be because they've got a lot of students, med students.
Right, and they,
Tuck students.
and we don't hear about drug overdose, we don't hear all these problems from Shady Lane or whatever, so they're doing something right.
Young professionals.
And then we'd like to, somehow, I'd like to have them help us to replicate that.
That's their specialty in Lebanon, that's what they're doing,
Mhm.
is affordable housing, and promoting that.
So I
That's,
mean,
that's a good thought.
they may have just, why, I never, I think the wheel's been invented, so I'm gonna try to do it, figure it out. So here again,
Mhm.
the wheel may be already designed and made, all we have to do is
Encourage the next wheel.
encourage them, and people love to help other people.
Mhm.
If they know that what they're doing is really pretty great, then they're gonna be head over heels to help us.
Okay.
And I was amazed that these characters and all their things didn't even touch on it.
Right,
Hmm.
like I said, they have a preconceived program that they presented around the state, and that's what they presented to it.
Okay.
One thing I want to counsel is, a couple of us have said, we should do, or we can do thus and such, we can make Pondview do something. Well, I'm not gonna. I mean, none of us is actually gonna go and invest the dough to do that. I think what we need to say, though, is that we want to allow these kinds of things to happen.
Oh, that's
I mean,
fine.
I mean, I think that's the thing that
We want to promote.
Facilitate. Yeah.
promote, facilitate, permit, any of those words, because I think there's a perception in the Upper Valley that Lyme is pretty restrictive, and it's like, so, I mean,
And we talked through that many months ago about
Yeah.
that perception.
remind that.
Okay. So let's go to your points.
Yeah,
David's questions?
these questions, yeah.
Earl, you saw these? Sue gave you a copy?
I just skimmed his questions, I think they're interesting questions too. To the extent that we say, should we allow X kind of development, commercial development here, more dense development, townhouses, whatever, I think it's important that we offer it with a, with some guidance as to what it would mean to the town. Should we allow 50 apartments to be built? Well, everybody's gonna say, well, no.
That's exactly right.
They're gonna say, Lyme's perfect the way it is. And we say, well, if we allowed 50 apartments to be built and it saved everybody $1,000 on their taxes, now, there's an interesting question that you can have a discussion about, or it saves you $2,000, or it saves you $300 on your taxes. I mean, whatever the numbers show.
Yep.
I mean, I think that you can't just say, should you allow this? Because it's too easy to say no.
Well, that's kind of where.
And that, part of what you were saying,
Sure. No, that's what surveys do.
you can lead people wherever you want with the
Yeah,
survey, if
absolutely.
you do it right. So,
Good. So I think we all agree that the questionnaire needs to be reworked
mhm,
significantly.
mhm,
Would we all agree with that?
Yes,
okay,
And that until we're comfortable with that, we don't want to go forward.
mhm,
And until we're comfortable with the final presentation, we don't want to go forward. So those are the two key things we need to get.
mhm.
So,
Who is the architect of these questions that we see in
I think ultimately we are. I
the?
mean, we,
No,
Where,
who-
I'm talking,
who developed
how
them?
did they get developed? How did they,
consultants drew these up,
mhm.
and David felt strongly and drew up these.
all right.
I think John Stadler was involved in the first one.
Okay. I don't know that, I'm just, so we along with the planning board, I mean, we need to go back to them and tell them that we have these concerns.
Which we'll do tomorrow night.
And that we want to go another round with the consultants with that presentation, because I haven't seen a revamped presentation yet, I don't believe any of us have. And we want to go at least 1 or 2 more rounds on the questionnaire until we're all comfortable.
And we're not feeling a rush we wanna get things right,
Totally
We're
agree.
clearly
or as
not
right
ready.
as we can.
We're not gonna be ready for October 1, I think.
No.
Are we all in agreement that it should be postponed?
I think we should wait for tomorrow's meeting, and I apologize that I won't be here, but I think you can convey that, and if they disagree strongly, we'll have to have a meeting, but I don't think they should go forward if we're uncomfortable.
Right.
That's my feeling, and I can dial in tomorrow night if you need me to. Okay?
What's your cell phone number?
401-965-3584, and I'll actually be driving, so you're welcome to call me.
At 7 o'clock?
Oh, but the planning board has 2 cases ahead of it, so we would come tagged on the end of this
That
meeting.
might be over now by the time you guys get to that, but
The,
anyway, you're welcome to call me.
Right. And in fact, I typically do go to the planning, just as a total aside, I typically do go to the planning board meetings just to listen in and hear. And I've had no qualms about presenting statements of fact. The LCDC met last night. They did in fact discuss that. But this is a more involved thing. It
I'm
would be
taking
good.
notes and I can,
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go there
I think
as well.
I will be there.
I
Yeah,
think
the
we-
more of us that are there, that it's better.
I think the 2 things that we should say, and we should agree if we're gonna say these,
Mhm.
are 1, we're uncomfortable with the current state of the deliverable, the presentation, and 2, we're uncomfortable with, or we're not satisfied with the questionnaire, and we want both of them reworked over the next few weeks. Given that level of discomfort,
Mhm.
we do not believe that October 1 is appropriate for the first presentation.
Now, why don't we like the folks that presented?
We don't like the presentation.
Well, why?
It
I
presents.
know why, but yeah, well, okay.
It presents, in my opinion, it presents a data set that is very limited based upon that they use the number of kids per unit, and that drives all of the outcomes. So I want to see some analysis of how that moves. Pond View as an example. It could be 0 or it could be 0.5. I think they're using 0.39, I can't remember.
Yeah.
The 3/8 rate.
0.38, yeah.
Yeah.
So that may be an average, but is it an accurate average for what we're proposing or what we might move forward with?
Yeah, because just while you were talking, I can imagine that one of either of these two bring up the fact that we didn't like the presentation. The first thing they're going to say is why. And it's not that they didn't wear ties right, it's that.
It was negative and biased, in my opinion. It should.
I don't think we need to use that kind of
Yeah,
term,
we're not,
Sue,
we
because.
don't wanna say that we don't like them because they didn't come up with an easy answer for us.
Mhm.
That's what we don't wanna say.
I don't think they provided enough alternatives.
Hmm.
Yeah, some of the alternatives may be bad. But are you telling me there are no alternatives that are good, like Pond View?
Well, I just
The other
wanna-
thing I'll throw in is 85 Dartmouth College Highway, the village there. I believe there are 22 units there. I believe there are either 0 or 1.
Yeah, that's another,
Student.
why are those things happening?
Well, I mean, because it's not an attractive place to raise kids, and so, I mean, but that's,
But I mean, they should be telling us something, or giving us at least some guidance. And-
That-
Well, I
that should be
don't
factored
agree
into
with
their analysis.
that it's not attractive.
Mhm.
It's based on the fact that the birth rate in New Hampshire is way
Mhm, mhm.
down. We're according to this article that I sent out, either first or second in the nation for the least.
Right, that was not in
Amount of
today's
children.
paper or whatever, yesterday, about that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's on.
And the only way to keep your children, the number of children stable is to have them migrate in. And that, with the last reception, that migration slowed. And our census this year is 187 kids in the K through 8.
Really?
Yes, that's down
Mm-hmm.
13, 15 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that is reflective of something.
Well,
And-
I caution us to use a single data point as a trend.
No, I know.
Yes, right.
but-
And
You
I-
don't
and
wanna-
I-
you don't
and
wanna
I-
debate.
And I've said that there are companies who forecast class size in towns very, very accurately. And I was disappointed not to see that information in the presentation, because that's the number one driver.
Mhm.
And I think I asked for that to be added, and they said they had access to that, so we'll see. But I think, number one, we need to get the updated presentation so we can take a look at the changes they made.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so Sue, should you make that call or should I?
You,
Okay, I just don't wanna step on,
no, you're not.
Government. okay,
Not
so.
at all. Be my guest.
So we need to get that presentation back, and you can tell the planning board, we're gonna make that phone call, that we wanna see that next draft, and that we're not going to move forward, what we would recommend not moving forward, I don't wanna state anything, until we all agree on it, with an October, 1 meeting. Okay?
Yep.
So I will make that phone call tomorrow morning to them and find out and send an email to everybody in our committee, and you can forward it to the planning board, finding out when we'll see that next draft of the presentation. And I'll also ask to set up a conference call to talk about the questions that we would then draw from that presentation.
So, just thinking farther along, if we got a really bang-up report that we say, yes, this addresses our questions, and that came in September 30, could we consider having the first meeting in mid-October?
I think a couple weeks of preparation to give the planning board and us the time to have a meeting and all agree that we're in a good place.
Yep.
The second meeting is scheduled for October 17th.
That's right, yes, so
So
we're not blowing
that-
off October, forget it, we're
No.
into, yes, okay. I
We
just
should
wanted
be
to-
able to get it together by the 17th.
I would agree, but I wouldn't argue that October 30th would be awful, because we
Mhm.
need to get it right, and I think
Right.
that's our primary
I
concern.
agree.
Excellent.
Okay?
I agree.
Okay, so let's talk about action items. I'm gonna make the phone call tomorrow
Mhm.
and find out when we're gonna get that. You guys are gonna cover tomorrow morning, tomorrow's meeting with the planning board,
Yep.
Mhm.
and try to all agree that we're not gonna do the October 1 meeting
Mhm.
until we have a presentation that we've all approved and a
Mhm.
questionnaire that we've all approved.
Yep.
And I think we shouldn't try to do more than that at tomorrow's meeting. I will get you feedback prior to the meeting, so you have that date soon.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Is there other business we need to cover?
What about the questionnaire? We
Well,
wanna,
I looked at the questionnaire and said that it wouldn't work. I just didn't like that.
No.
It's all needed questions and we're not, and I don't think it explains what we're trying to do, which I've said 3 times already tonight.
yeah.
And
I think
I
the
can
questionnaire,
fiddle and diddle with it a little bit.
I think the questionnaire comes from the presentation, Sue, and if we can have a questionnaire that follows a presentation that is balanced and offers some alternatives, and those questions ask the townspeople what alternatives they'd like to pursue, and it may be none. I think we've done our job, and I think that's all we can do is try to present some alternatives that are fact-based and let people make decisions.
Yep. And, you know, once we get in that direction, then we have to start digging out the people that will respond, but we don't have to worry about that tonight.
Yep.
And that's gonna go to those guys and
We have a
Dr.
great,
Patty, she's got a whole list of people.
we have a great list of all
I
those.
mean, some of these real tiny, small.
Yep.
resources or whatever we have, and, could be instrumental in, you know, we may have to have a meeting with those leaders and try to explain, we don't care how they vote. That's not, we want them to vote knowing what we've been trying to do.
Yes.
I think that's a great idea. So that people like David and the rest of our committee are in the loop, let's try to send an update after the planning committee so they know what we're doing, because they're not here tonight.
Okay.
Well, Rich can send out the minutes to let everybody
But
know.
that won't happen by tomorrow.
You never know.
So, at our next meeting, we should have had the redo from our experts.
Yes.
What else should we have? Because I think that it's going to get critical that we get as many people here as possible, this group, rather than just three of us.
Right,
Mhm.
so, and it brings up when, you know, something like this, if there is movement, we should probably meet on a weekly basis to get this
Right.
thing ironed out.
Yep.
That being said, I'm away next week, so.
Can we shoot for back-to-back meetings, the 10th and 17th? And the 17th, if everything goes well, might be our first presentation.
Right,
But I think if we shot for the 10th,
I think we should meet before that.
Well, I think that
Because
after he
that just
talks,
gives us 1 week.
well, after he talks to these folks, maybe he could give a good idea of when we can expect their redo or any
Mhm.
advice that they give us.
Yep.
It may take them 3 weeks to get it, I wouldn't think so,
Yep.
but.
Well, our next meeting is scheduled for the 26th, so.
You can keep that provided, we'll have something to work on.
so we'll schedule 26th,
At this
10th,
point.
and 17th.
Mhm.
And we are all gonna have schedule conflicts, but we'll figure it out.
Now, is Wednesday a bad day for people, or are we just lazy?
I'm just gonna be out of town for weeks at a time.
And there's always gonna be somebody out of town.
Mhm.
The people had 15 things for me to do this weekend with the church, but I'm out of town. You know, I'm kind of happy. Well, you know, after you get overloaded, it's nice to have the relatives coming from California once in 5 years or something. You know, don't put that in your minutes. Yeah, and then,
So let's just make sure that the committee agrees on how often and when we're gonna meet. Right now, we're gonna shoot for the 26th, 10th, and 17th,
Mhm.
but after the next 2 days, we'll figure out if that makes sense.
and who are we actually missing from our group?
Mike Smith, I don't know why he's not here.
And David.
And David said he wasn't.
Mike and
gonna be
David.
here, right?
Jonathan Vogel, I
And
don't know
Nils
what's going on with him,
is
and
out of town.
Nils is still, his daughter's until the election.
Well, do we need to, I don't know, bring anybody else in at this date? It'd be hard to bring them up to date, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want just
And
bodies.
if anybody's interested, you know, the meetings are posted. If
Right.
anybody's interested in.
Well, there are
being
so
here,
many meetings.
Right, well, but,
Tell me about it.
yeah, but I think that that's, the fact that we don't have a big public here today says there's not a lot of people that would be willing to work hard on the meeting subject, sitting around in the wings, so.
I don't think that if the public were here, it would be anything that's been brought up tonight was
No, but I was just saying, if we had several, if we thought we were short of committee members, if we thought there weren't enough people to do the work, it would be useful to say to the crowd, is there anybody out there that wants to help?
I don't feel that way right now.
I don't feel that way, and there's,
And we still have the planning board, and we still have the public meetings coming up.
Yeah.
So unless you feel strongly, Earl, I'm just,
No, no,
I don't
no,
wanna
no, I
bring
don't,
people up to
adding
speed.
bodies will be of no value.
Okay.
Sue, what's the attitude of the, not on the minutes, what's the attitude of the planning board?
hang on just a sec, shall we adjourn this meeting?
Well, I just wanna make sure that we're all comfortable with those action items.
You're right.
I am actually comfortable with those action items.
Okay, and that, I will give Sue feedback before the planning board meeting, so we get on board and we're synced up with them tomorrow.
Good.
Okay,
Okay.
move to adjourn the meeting,
Second?
Second.
Third.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. 7:41.